Feel like we might have had a false start there, everyone. So I'm going to go again in the hope that this time everyone can hear me. So good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're logging in from. Welcome to the first ever Stay in the Game Network webinar. My name's Radha. I'm the Director of Design and Facilitation at Beyond Sport, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Whilst we're in this unprecedented time of global instability and social distancing, protecting our mental health is even more important. Today, we'll look at the impact of the current global situation through a mental well-being lens, both in terms of professional and grassroots sports. We'll explore what the sports industry can offer society by way of support, but also how within the sector we are able to support one another, and how we can strengthen our communities through sports at this time of need. We'll also touch on the issue of mental well-being within sports outside of the current situation, because it's clearly an everyday topic, not one confined to where we find ourselves right now. And future Beyond Sport digital events will offer plenty of interactive networking and discussion opportunities for all of you attendees. And we'll be using some brilliant technology that we're in the process of trialing. So for today, this webinar is about offering you some great speakers, and I promise I will stop speaking and I will let them start soon. But before I do, just a little bit of webinar housekeeping. If you have any questions you'd like to ask our speakers, you can click on the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get as many of them answered as we can. We have some specific time for Q&A later, and I'll alert you to it when we get there. But as we go through the next hour or so, feel free to post your questions at any one time. We'll also send out some polls during the webinar to get a sense of what you're thinking and feeling. So let's have a little practice. I would love to know how you're all feeling today. Don't worry, your answers are anonymous. So when you see the poll come up on your screen, please just click and let me know where you find yourself today. We'll get a temperature of what our virtual room looks like. So you get options from 1 all the way through to 10. 10 is your real lifetime peak form. At 6, you're on average form. 5 and below, things aren't so great, struggling a little bit right now. And if you're finding yourself hitting 1s and 2s, please make sure you do reach out for some help. And we'll make sure that we share some links with you at the end of the webinar so you know where to go. So let's see, about 50% of our audience have voted so far. Let's see if we can get a few more answers in. Most people are tracking at around the 7 on good form. I think that's pretty good given the situation we find ourselves in right now. Okay, thank you so much to those of you that voted. I'll give you a quick overview and then we'll move on. So most people on 7, we've got some 8, someone's on 9 in exceptional form, a few people are on 9, some are on 6, and we've got a few that are having a bit of a tough time. So thank you for being honest and sharing that with us, and make sure you seek help. And as I said, we'll share some information at the end of the webinars to offer you some opportunities to find some of that support. So thank you very much for taking the time to share that with us. And many of you do know us here at Beyond Sport, but I do know we have some new people in our audience today. So by way of a brief overview, Beyond Sport was established in 2008, and we are the global force for sustainable social change through sport. We convene groups and build networks that go beyond cultural, geographic, political and social divisions as we optimize sport's role in creating long-term solutions to the most pressing challenges of our time. We celebrate and fund those projects that are using sport to make the UN Sustainable Goals a reality. You'll hear from one of those projects later today. And we promote and advocate for sport to be part of the solution wherever it can contribute. We've done this with many issues around the world, from the refugee crisis to STEM education. So for those of you who are new to Beyond Sport, welcome to the family. In fact, now's a great time to find out who's actually attending today. So I'm going to launch another poll and we can find out who's here. You'll see on the list that we have a range of options for you to fill in. So are you a sports team or league, a federation or governing body? Are you a corporate organisation, an NGO? Are you from the healthcare sector, from academia, or mysteriously, are you from other? So about 40% of you have already voted. Let's see if we can get a few more of you before we publish. It's great to see so many teams and leagues joining us. It's really brilliant. The NGO contingent are certainly showing a strong hand as well. Fantastic. Nicole, if you want to go ahead and publish this poll so everyone can get a sense of who's in the room. There you go, everyone can see roughly who's there and who's joining us today. So thank you again for taking the time to join us at the Stay in the Game Network webinar. Let me tell you a little bit about Stay in the Game. The Stay in the Game Network was formed last year to use sport as a platform, catalyst and channel for industries to work together to change the narrative of mental health to one of hope, prevention and healing. We launched it at our inaugural forum in June 2019. And as I reflect on that day and the 9 months since then, it's clear that the conversation around mental health and mental well-being has been growing in a continuously positive way, with concrete actions being taken. Since that time, we've seen the Citroën 33 Foundation galvanize all Pittsburgh sports teams to have one unified mental health campaign. We've seen the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention and the NGO Spirit of Soccer work together on a mental health curriculum specifically for those youths affected by conflict. We've seen the Football Association in England partner with mental health charities Mind, Sporting Chance, Calm, and an initiative spearheaded by the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge and the Duke of Sussex called Heads Up, to further open up conversations on mental health and to provide a range of support options for professional and grassroots players alike. And we've also seen the US Soccer Foundation integrate social and emotional learning into their Soccer for Success program. So plenty has happened in those last 9 months. And at last year's forum, I shared a bit about my own journey and sport's role within my own mental health challenges. Since that time, the security I felt through the ongoing normalizing of the narrative has continued to be crucial to my own recovery. On the form score I shared with you earlier, I hit #1 on that score last year. But because of the fact that our industry is taking a head-on approach to mental health, I felt safe enough to say that I needed help, to take 3 months out of work to go into residential treatment for trauma and eating disorders, and to come back to work in a much safer, stronger space. So for me, I believe that these conversations are vital at an individual and at an industry level. And at that industry level, the Stay in the Game Network is a collective of like-minded organisations that have joined across sectors, including sport, healthcare, social change and more. These organisations are committed to collaborating on progressive solutions for an issue that really doesn't discriminate. 1 in 4 people in the world will be affected by mental or neurological disorders at some point in their lives. Around 450 million people currently suffer from such conditions, placing mental disorders among the leading causes of ill health and disability worldwide. As many of you will know, at Beyond Sport, we firmly believe in the power of partnership, and we never tackle issues alone. And that's certainly true of Stay in the Game, which we launched in partnership with founding members, the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention, Citroën 33 Foundation, Centerstone, and USA Cycling. So thank you to all of you for your partnership and leadership, and we look forward to hearing from some of you shortly. The MLB, MLS, NBA, NFL, NHL, and WNBA are also supporting this initiative in much the same way they've supported us at Beyond Sports since 2011, and we're grateful for their commitment. Indeed, as you saw earlier, it's great to see so many teams from those leagues in attendance today. I'll share some more information about the network and the benefits of joining at the end of this webinar. Those of you familiar with our work will also know that Beyond Sport convenings are not just about conversations. They're about taking action and creating new partnerships. So I hope that by the end of today's session, lots of you will feel ready to join us via the network to contribute your own expertise and ideas towards making actions and conversations on mental health open and productive. More to come on that later. So what is in store for you over the next hour? Well, I promised I'd stop talking soon and you'll hear from a range of speakers, and I'll keep to my word. And we'll cover topics such as sports' role in suicide prevention. We'll look at the current landscape and what it means at both the professional sports and grassroots sports level. We'll hear some personal insights from an Emmy Award winner, and there'll be opportunities for you to share your current challenges, questions, and ideas. So let's get started. It is my great pleasure to introduce Colleen Carr, Director of the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention, housed at the Education Development Centre, and a founding partner of the Stay in the Game Network. Colleen will share on sports' role in suicide prevention. Colleen, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Radha. Can you hear me?
We've got you.
Great. So as Radha said, I serve as the director for the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention. We are the nation's public-private partnership that brings together diverse sectors from across the federal government to across the private sector to really tackle suicide prevention at the national level in a way that had not been done before. We serve as a convener and as a catalyst, and so it certainly was a natural alignment in goals to work with Beyond Sport to really bring suicide prevention and sport together to see what we could do collectively. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. But about the Action Alliance, we bring together more than 250 national partners from diverse sectors, including the automobile sector, construction, defense, entertainment, faith, healthcare, manufacturing, news media, public safety, social media, etc. A really diverse group of folks that had not been at the table before. And our role with that is to advance the national strategy for suicide prevention, which really shows that there's a role for everyone. There's a role for each of these sectors in reducing suicide. So in the Stay in the Game initiative with Beyond Sport, we're joined by our Action Alliance partner Centerstone, who serves really as the clinical mental health partner as a founding member, as well as US Cycling and Citroen 33. It's been a really great first year of working together. I had a privilege of meeting many of you at the first Stay in the Game Summit in New York City last summer, and really look forward to working with many more of you as the network gets off the ground over in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. Next slide. So when we look at suicide, I think it's important to really look at that whole continuum of who's impacted by suicide, because that really helps us think about what should our prevention efforts be. So next slide, please. As you'll see here, suicide is currently the 10th leading death in the US, and it's one of the leading causes of death that continues to rise, and it did so again in 2018. And in fact, over the past 20 years, we've seen the rate of suicide increase by more than 35% in this country. And that's something that I think we probably aren't that surprised by, considering how much we hear about suicide now in the news and via entertainment depictions and whatnot. But it's really important to really think about that. It's a leading cause of death in the US, and what is our response from various sectors and nationally to really tackle that? And one of the things that makes that more complex is that suicide is a complex public health issue, and it's not just a mental health issue. So when we're thinking about what can we all do, even if we're not clinicians or mental health providers, there really is a role for everyone. And the CDC released data in 2018 that showed the role that there's many factors that contribute to suicide, and not just mental health. So things that were shown to have contributing factors included relationship issues, substance use issues, physical health issues, job loss, financial strain, legal problems, and then of course mental illness as well. And many of these not being mutually exclusive. But it really goes to show that not only is the impact of mental health and suicide really broad, our prevention efforts need to be broad as well. And that can help us intervene early on before something reaches a crisis situation. Next slide, please. So when we look at the numbers, they really can be quite shocking. Here in the US, reported suicides are about 48,000 per year. But it's really, as the slide shows, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's 1.4 million adults who attempted suicide in 2018. 3.3 million adults made a suicide plan, and over 10 million adults had serious thoughts of suicide. And so it's not just about the numbers of who we've lost to suicide, it's thinking about the people in our community, in our country that are hurting and really having serious thoughts of suicide or just in pain, and what can we do to alleviate that pain. Next slide, please. And so with that context, hopefully you can see what we saw at the Action Alliance and with Beyond Sport and our other founding partners, that there is a role for sport in suicide prevention. and that it is multi-level actually. The Action Alliance had the opportunity to host a roundtable discussion at 2 Beyond Sport events over the last year with leaders from sport. And what we heard was very clearly, there's two roles here. There's one, how do we build a network that brings leaders from mental health and sport together to support the sports sector's efforts to reduce suicide and address mental wellness within sport? But then also, how do we leverage the power of sport and the cultural influence of sport to contribute to suicide prevention and mental health efforts nationally? And that's really what we're looking to do here. And you'll hear from folks on today's call that are really working at both of those levels. And the network is really designed to bring both of those opportunities together so we can support our athletes and all of those within our sport organizations, but also to play a role through outreach and others in community suicide prevention efforts. And then just touching on that first point, I think we've all recognized there's really been a sea change over the last few years with athletes coming out and talking about their own struggles, with leagues and other organizations really tackling mental health and suicide prevention publicly. And so I think we'll hear more about that today, but it's really great to see how we can really harness that momentum and bring that to a larger network across sport. And then the second part, really being leveraging the influence of sport in communities. With more than 162 million Americans claiming some relationship to sport-related activities, there's a real opportunity here by bringing folks together from across the country that are working in a similar sector to really infuse suicide prevention and mental health in innovative ways through community outreach efforts and community funding priorities through sport in a way that mental health can't do on its own. It really needs the sector of sport to come together. And so we look forward to the network serving in this role. So really, just as we look at the data, it underscores the critical need for all of us to be working together across sectors to not just save lives from suicide, but to promote wellness and lives that are rich and engaging. And so I will close there and thank each of you for being here today to learn more about the work that partners are doing and about the network. And we look forward to working with all of you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Colleen. And absolutely a multifaceted challenge that needs multifaceted solutions with various organizations coming together. And as you said at the end, you know, the importance of that dual role of sport, both in terms of illuminating it through those people with platforms and giving them a chance to speak out so that we can look after our athletes and our industry, but also so we can leverage that and share personal stories to inspire others to be more open about theirs. And those people with a public platform really do make a difference, and their honesty and openness continues to destigmatize this topic. And as such, I'm going to invite one of those people with a platform and a profile to join us. So it's an honor to invite Trenny Kusnierek, NBC Boston anchor, sports anchor and reporter, to share some of her experience, strength and hope with us. Trenny, it's all yours.
Radha and everyone else, thanks for inviting me to this platform and to share my story and hopefully talk to everyone and answer some questions about how we can all work together during an especially stressful time for people, I think, who sometimes don't have the same kind of stressors or anxieties that many of us live with day to day. Just some quick background. My name is Trenny Kusnierek, as Radha just said. I'm a sports anchor and reporter with NBC Sports Boston. I'm also a mental health advocate. And I am a mental health advocate because I have struggled with anxiety and depression since I was about 5 years old, which we called homesickness back in the day. That was what my anxiety was called. And I never talked about it publicly for various reasons that I'm sure anyone that's on this call is familiar with. Being in the public eye, I didn't want anyone to view me as weak or someone who was incapable of doing a job. I worried about not getting insurance in the United States for a pre-existing condition. And I was just ashamed of it. I didn't really fully understand mental health challenges and that a lot of people deal with what I deal with every day until I got a little bit older. It wasn't until 2012 when Junior Seau died by suicide that everything changed for me. And it was on that day in May of 2012 that I decided to begin sharing my story. Very quickly, a local reporter, I'm from Milwaukee originally, was working on sort of a feature story about my career and my path and the places I had been and wanted to go. And on the day that Junior died, I reached out to him and said, we need to talk about mental health, and I want to share my story so that maybe we have less Junior say-outs. So I've been talking about everything that I've gone through ever since. This is an interesting time because I have a lot of people, now that I talk about it so openly, in schools, on television programs, with legislators, on forums like this. I have a lot of people now reaching out to me saying, you know, I don't know what to do right now. I'm in my house. I feel isolated. I can't get out of my head. I'm having all these anxious thoughts. And what's been, you know, sort of interesting to me is as someone who has dealt with those thoughts in her head and trying to have to find ways to cope with it. I actually have felt fairly comfortable and in a pretty good mental space right now because I've had years of therapy and the tools to work through things. But what it's also said to me is that a lot of people who haven't dealt with mental health issues in the past are suddenly now having some symptoms or experiences that other people have dealt with before, and that this is pushing this, you know, this coronavirus experience is sort of pushing them all to the forefront. So if we can put up, I have some things. I actually checked in with a friend of mine who is a psychologist. She's published, she works with athletes, she works with from veterans and current military members with a local VA in Illinois and Wisconsin. And I just asked her some things that we could share with people and how to navigate the waters of a time where I think a lot of people are not fully equipped necessarily to understand how we have to have this whole sea change of a lifestyle and things that we're used to doing, disappointments of job loss, maybe being used to if you're training for the Olympics and now that has to be pushed back a year, even just everyday things that used to just be sort of patterns and normal for all of us has now changed drastically. So the one thing that she said right away is we should all be limiting our media consumption about the virus. That can be really anxiety inducing. We can be consuming so much that it's all we're thinking about, and it can be conflicting and make things worse. One thing that's helped me a ton during this time is the second point, which is keep a schedule. You know, for me personally, even though now I could sleep in till 9 or 10 in the morning and maybe work out later in the day, I still get up early in the morning and sort of follow the same progressions I would if I was going into the office to work. So today, for instance, I got up at 6:30 in the morning. I did my meditation in the morning. Then I went and ran my errands. I went for my normal, you know, Monday run, came back, got ready for work, then sat down and began my day. My day ends a little bit later than most people's. It doesn't end at, you know, 4 or 5 o'clock. So I've sort of pushed everything and try to keep it exactly the same, keep the times that I eat the same. And then I try to, that also helps me on the weekends, not have a schedule and sort of treat a weekend like a weekend, because I know what a lot of people are talking about right now is that weekends don't feel like a weekend. They just feel like another day because we're all in the house so much. Speaking of being in the house, she said it really is important to get outside. That fresh air, moving around, just a little bit of exercise outside will actually help your immune system, and it will also help your mental state of mind. So she said, even if it's getting outside for 10 or 15 minutes a day, a walk around the block, you know, obviously keeping social distance rules in mind, but that is really important. For people who are, if you have any teammates, athletes that you coach, colleagues who already have previous mental health issues and they might be on medication for that, please stress to them that they should not be altering or changing their medication at this time. This is not the best time to try and do something new, but that they should also, anyone who's been through therapy, sort of revisit the coping skills that a lot of us have learned through the course of what we've gone through. She also said it's really important, you know, a lot of times she tells her patients, put the phone down, don't be on technology all the time, have, you know, person-to-person interaction. That's not possible right now. So use technology to your advantage. Zoom web conferencing, FaceTime, Google Hangouts, anything that makes you feel a little less isolated and less alone. On a positive thing, and I thought this was really great, she told me that, you know, a lot of people see this as isolating, confining, and limiting of what we can do because we're all, you know, inside just of our homes most of the time. But she said during great personal challenges, really amazing growth can occur. So maybe there's something that you've always wanted to do. You've wanted to learn a language, maybe take a class online, maybe get in better shape, anything that it is. Pick a goal and pick something every day to either hone a skill that you already have or learn a new one, maybe pick up a new hobby. I have a friend who's teaching herself to knit. online, and she finds it to just sort of help her mind focus on one thing. And she also said that we should be finding comfort in community. And that to me was, is maybe the biggest thing I've taken away from all of this. Radha and I were talking last week about how we all try to be present. And that's something that is stressed all the time in mental health circles and with therapists and professionals, is not thinking ahead, not dwelling on the past, and really being in the moment. And right now, a lot of us don't have any other choice but to be in the moment, because each day is, it's one, it's kind of all the same, but two, we really honestly don't know what to expect a month or 2 months from now. And I'm finding, at least personally, that I'm reconnecting with people in a different way that I hope to carry on after this is all over. Whether it is Zoom conferencing with friends who live across the country, making that more of a habit, and also recognizing and realizing that when this is all over and we can all be in person again and sort of get back to whatever our new normal is, let's not forget how much we craved that human interaction and how kind and caring we were for each other during this time. She also talked a lot about, you know, taking this time to help others. If you're able to donate blood, if you're able to donate money, if you're able to help an elderly neighbor, doing something for someone else during this time can really make a huge difference. And just sort of to bring it full circle in sports, I know working in sports media, people are craving, you know, anything that isn't coronavirus related right now. And we actually today are relaunching all of our shows. We're going to be doing sort of live television every night and talking about sports again, which I know at this time seems insignificant, but it's also a way for people to sort of reconnect to normalcy in that way. And I think sports has such a powerful ability to bring people together before, during, and after major tragedies. And I see that being exactly the same here. I think when we're finally able to get back on the field, on the courts, on the ice, and play games again, that the athletes are going to be the ones leading the way.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Trenny. What a wonderfully practical yet still inspirational set of information you just shared with us there. And there's so many real pearls of wisdom in there that I know that I will continue to take away. And perhaps that you and I can have a little bit more of a chat in just a moment. But to the rest of you, before Trenny and I have a little bit of a conversation with you guys as well, now that you've heard some of that inspiration, we'd love to hear from everyone else. Perhaps you could submit via the chat function at the bottom of your screen any other organisations, teams or individuals that have inspired you in this space. And as we go through the rest of the webinar, I'll share a few of those out. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat function. So please do share anything that you've seen over the past, either over the past few weeks since we've been in the current situation, or indeed at any point where you've seen sports people, individuals, organisations really stand up and say something that's made you go, oh, wow, that's amazing. So speaking of that, let's come back to you, Trenny. Firstly, thank you for your honesty. As you know, I identify with much of what you've shared, and you talked about how important sport can be both now as we go through this process, but also in the rebuilding of that. And I just wondered if perhaps you might want to elaborate a little bit on where you see sport in the future and the role it will take, given what we've collectively gone through now.
I think it's a way, you know, I have to imagine that when we come out of this, there is going to be a level of hesitation, being in large groups again, that idea of, is this safe? Is it safe to, you know, to gather in the way that we gathered before? And I feel like sports is such a way to bring people together in a place that, you know, let's just use the NBA as an example. Let's say the NBA comes back and they get full throttle into the end of their season, or maybe they pick it up in the postseason. You know, the idea of being back in that building and watching live sports and being together as a community and coming together with our likes and dislikes, right? Like, what's great about sports is that your best friend can be a Celtics fan and you're a Lakers fan, and you may butt heads and exchange texts or go to the game together and beat each other's throats about a team, but it's still this shared experience. And I just think sports, better than any other entertainment medium, does that, because it brings people in from all different walks of life, all different parts of the population, and gives us something to talk about and to experience in a really unique way.
Fantastic. Oh my God, I'm already excited about the season coming back again. I completely agree with you there. I want to go back to some of your earlier experiences where you first decided that it was time for you to speak out, and sort of taking it not necessarily outside of the current scenario if you don't want to, but once you started sharing, how much did you notice people, both within the sports media, but also within the sports industry more broadly, as you went about your daily job? Did you notice they disclosed to you things more often?
It was overwhelming. I was really surprised, especially working, to be very candid, most of the sports that I cover are men's sports. I mostly cover professional men's sports, and to open up my Twitter DM or Instagram messages and to see athletes that I had covered for years and who, seemed fine. You would never imagine that while they were standing on the mound or on the field, that they were overcome by anxiety, or maybe that was their only refuge. And to hear them open up and tell me their story and say, I don't feel comfortable yet, but it helps knowing there's someone I can talk to about it, was a really amazing experience, because I think together collectively, the more people talk about it and the more people tell their story, it just makes everyone else feel a little less alone. On my personal Instagram page, I do this thing called Mental Health Monday, where I try to just talk about my own experiences, maybe answer questions, bring in someone like my friend who is a psychologist, or someone else in the mental health field, and share tips and coping skills with people, or maybe just personal stories. The amount of feedback I get from people who say, thank you, I never knew that someone like you felt like that before. That makes me feel so much better, has been unbelievably rewarding. And I think especially when it comes from an athlete, someone who, has a skill that most of us can only dream of. Most of us, dreamed when we were playing basketball of hitting the winning shot or competing in the Olympics. We don't really get to do that in real life. And so we see them as almost superhuman. And to understand that they go through some of the same challenges that someone who is an accountant or a sports anchor or a teacher goes through, I think it just brings us all together in a fabric of community that is really, really important. That while you may have a skill that seems superhuman, you really are just like me.
I mean, I literally couldn't have put that any better. That incredible ripple effect when someone is prepared to just show a bit of vulnerability being what Brené Brown tells us is the antidote to shame, and suddenly we start to dismantle the barriers that are around both the conversation and us. Trenny, thank you so much for your time today, for sharing that. I'm going to bring you back on towards the end of the webinar to maybe answer any questions, but also perhaps drop your Instagram handle into the chat function, and we'll make sure we share it so you get more and more people engaging with you on Mental Health Mondays. So once again, thank you to Trenny. So I asked some of you guys to submit a few things on the chat channel, telling me what you've seen in sport addressing mental wellness in this landscape. So I'm going to share a little bit from what I've heard. Kelsey tells us that players and teams have been leading by providing their salaries to address COVID and help those on the front lines. Lee shares that Hockey Talks, the NHL, is driving conversation in their sport around mental health and mental wellness. Daniel from Scottish Sports Futures telling us that they have a partnership with SAMH to help support the mental health and well-being of its participants, in addition to using young mental health ambassadors to deliver workshops. And that really picks up on that point around lived experience being shared, being so crucial as we continue this conversation. We've got USA Cycling partnering with a number of non-profits and the VA to aid with the mental and physical wellness of the USA's veterans. Another example from a sporting superstar, Michael Johnson, the incredible four-time Olympic gold medalist athlete, his post on Twitter about him focusing what he can control and trying not to focus on what he can't. He says, it pays to know what works for you. Such a simple note that someone suggests that they found it really, really helpful. EuroLeague Basketball has told us they invite athletes and coaches from throughout the EuroLeague structure to openly talk about mental health issues in sport. So even in just those few minutes, we've seen numerous examples of brilliant things that sport is doing, both at an individual, industry and organisational level. Do feel free to continue sharing your examples, and we'll capture them and include them in the report that we'll share back with you at the end. So moving on to our next segment. In this piece, we're going to take a look at both ends of the sports spectrum. We've got two great speakers coming up, and they'll consider the question, what does the current landscape mean for either professional sports or grassroots sports? They'll each share an example of how they are addressing the mental health of either professional athletes or their participants respectively. After we've heard from both speakers, you'll have an opportunity to ask all four of today's speakers some questions. So please do start thinking of those questions and submit them on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And if you want to direct them to a specific panelist, please make sure you do note that on your questions as well. So our first speaker to join us in this segment is a founding member of the Stay in the Game network. She's from US Cycling, and it's their Safe Sport Director, Kelsey Erickson. Kelsey, it's over to you.
Thank you. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
We've got you. Okay,
perfect. So I've just realized after the two speakers that have already gone ahead that were amazing that I missed a slide. So we can go to my first slide and I'll introduce what I should have added as well. So I took over this role in May 2019. So unfortunately I was not at the founding meetings in June, but very much am now involved and excited about the partnership that we have here. I am the Safe Sport Director, but I was given the freedom to basically build out how I felt fit kind of across a broader spectrum. And so the things that have been talked about already, this idea of sharing stories and lived experiences is very much a part of my experience in sport, both as an athlete and then prior to this role, spending 10 years working in international anti-doping. And so in November of 2019, we launched, and Colleen actually highlighted it in her presentation, those stories from the Players Tribune. We launched a program called In Our Own Words on our website, and it was very much inspired by the Players Tribune, which I have been absolutely in love with since it first launched. And for those of you that might not know about it, because it's largely American, and I quickly discovered had never talked about a cyclist before, it's a platform where athletes can speak candidly about things that are important to them. And it's often about mental health related things, but really it's about anything. And so I knew when I took this role that I wanted to do that for our community at USA Cycling. So in November, we launched In Our Own Words. And it is a platform where our members can talk about things that are important to them and where we can start to normalize some of these conversations. And so we launched in November with 3 stories. One was an anonymous story by an athlete who was sexually assaulted by her coach. Another one was a professional male athlete talking about dealing with depression. And another one was a professional female athlete talking about dealing with chronic injuries. And since that November launch, we have launched a new story every Tuesday. So it has quickly turned into a platform where we're able to talk about anything and everything that matters to our community. We're able to put it out there and say, you're not alone. And we're able to hold ourselves accountable as USA Cycling to address issues that need to be addressed that are spoken to us from our members. And so that's been an awesome thing. And I know part of what I'm meant to be talking about today is kind of how we're dealing with the COVID situation. And one of the things that we've done is we've increased our publications starting last week. We're now publishing a new story every Tuesday and Thursday. And a lot of those stories are ones that have been written by our athletes talking about how COVID has impacted them and how they're coping with it. So we'll be actually publishing one tomorrow from a member who has been diagnosed with COVID and they're dealing with it. And then on Thursday, we'll publish one from a professional athlete talking about how they're handling quarantine. Last Thursday, we published one of an athlete talking about how they're dealing with the fact that they, at that point, we now know, but as of Thursday, didn't know when the Olympics would be and what that means for them right now. So that was our first step of really kind of starting this conversation around mental health, which we know impacts every human on the planet. There's a spectrum of mental health, and there's being mentally unwell all the way up to being mentally healthy. And we all lie somewhere on that spectrum. So to say that mental health only impacts some people is just not true. We all deal with it. Some of us just lie on different ends of the spectrum, and often it's at different times in our lives. And so that was a big part of kind of the culture that we're trying to create at USA Cycling, is saying, hey, this impacts all of us. Let's talk about it. You need to know you're not alone, regardless of where you are on that spectrum. So following that, in February of this year, so not long ago, we launched a program that you see here, which is USA Cycling's Wellbeing Program. We were inspired by a program that USA Weightlifting launched in 2019. And ultimately what we're doing now is we're providing free mental health services to every athlete who has ever been affiliated with our national team. And when I say we're offering free, I can't take credit for that. We're developing a network of licensed counselors who are willing to offer pro bono services to our athletes. And so the way that it's set up and what the announcement stated was that if you are an athlete who has been affiliated with our national team, so whether you're in our development program or you're a former Olympian, it doesn't matter, anywhere on that spectrum, if you've ever worn red, white, and blue for USA Cycling, past or present, you qualify for this program. And so all they have to do is reach out to me, let me know where they're located, let me know generally what they want to address, whether it's maybe sexual assault or, eating disorder or anything else. And this is to deal with trauma that's outside of sport. So we define the word trauma, but really it's recognizing that your well-being in and out of sport impacts your performance. And so as an athlete, we work so hard on training physically, and we're definitely seeing more efforts towards training from like the sports psychology perspective, but sports psychology doesn't always address the mental wellness side of it. And so this is our opportunity to say, hey, whatever you're dealing with, whether it's something that happened when you were 2 years old or something that happened yesterday or something that's happening today, we recognize that that impacts your performance. And not just that, more importantly, it impacts you as a person. And we care about you as a person because you're a person first and an athlete second. And so we launched in February. We've already had multiple people reach out. And importantly, it's not just our athletes. We're also offering it to every contract worker associated with our national team. So that includes soigneurs, coaches, even officials. So this is something I'm really excited about. We're building up a network, as I said, of service providers. And the goal is to provide our members, past and present, with someone that they can meet with in person in their location. Now, given the current COVID situation, we've had to alter that. And so I'm now linking them up with virtual counseling, which in some ways is easier because it has allowed us to kind of connect people that maybe aren't necessarily in the same location. But this, was something we launched pre-awareness of COVID. And it's something I'm so thankful we have in place. And so as soon as kind of the world was disrupted with COVID, we sent this out. We've sent this out weekly to remind our past and present national team affiliates that this is available to them. And we want nothing more than to be able to make that connection for them. And so that was kind of a progression from In Our Own Words. In Our Own Words started the conversation. This is the practical application that we're taking. And then the next slide, if we can go to that. Obviously, our world was disrupted at USA Cycling pretty significantly a couple weeks ago. We've canceled all events from now at least until the beginning of May. Reality is that'll probably be extended. And we have athletes whose lives have literally been blown up because of this situation. Especially for our professional athletes, they have calculated every minute of every day on a 4-year cycle. And all of a sudden, that crucial peak training, the date that they had it set for to peak and rest and be ready for the Olympics, just got thrown out the window. And so, for me, the first thing that I was thinking about when all this happened is, we've gone from having athletes who have control every controllable they possibly can to now having athletes that literally feel like they have nothing that they can control. And so today, actually, this evening, we will launch our first week of virtual activities. And the idea behind this was, hey, I can't give our athletes control of much right now, but I can tell them that they can expect to show up at 6 o'clock Mountain Standard Time and 8 o'clock Wednesdays and Fridays. And they can show up and expect and know that these things are going to happen. And so it gives them something that they can schedule for on a daily basis, 1 hour of every day where they know that they can show up, they can have other people around them, and we can be a community, even if it's just for an hour. So tonight we have a mindfulness session that's being led by a licensed counselor. Tomorrow night we have a cooking class, which will be live, that's being led by a professional chef and the co-founder and president of Split Nutrition. So we're going to be, I sent out the recipe last night. Our members are able to order all the ingredients that they need. And tomorrow we're going to be cooking together, learning how we can be better in the kitchen. On Wednesdays and Fridays, we have a virtual yoga class that they can join in on YouTube. And then on Thursdays, we're going to rotate through with surprises, everything from bingo to speakers to any requests that they might have. So, you know, this is just, it's one thing that I can do. It's not much, but it's something that we can do. And our goal is to continue this every week with different hosts. We're going to look to, right now it's being offered live to anyone in our elite program. We will probably extend that down to our Devo program, our development program as well. And then we'll record them and we'll share them out with our community. And the idea, as I said, is really just to provide some consistency for our members in a time when so much feels out of our control. So yeah, we've got a lot of things going at USA Cycling. And for me, the big thing is just changing the culture to recognize that there is absolutely strength in vulnerability. And in the 9 months that I've been at USA Cycling, I've definitely seen shifts towards recognizing that. And I'm excited to see where we can go in the future, especially with our athletes leading the way, because they're the ones that are speaking up and talking and saying that this matters and that they want to be a part of not just starting the conversation, but continuing it. And so, yeah, that's some of the stuff that we're doing right now. And I'm continually looking for new ways to grow and evolve. But yeah, it'll be great to be a part of this organization. And I'm excited to kind of see how we can partner together. And really, you know, this is what we're doing at USA Cycling, but ultimately the goal is for this to be across all sports at all levels, is these conversations aren't unique to one sport or one country or one competitive level. We're all connected in this, and the more we can talk about it and learn from one another and support one another, the better. So if there's anything that I can do, and I probably should have said at the beginning, my PhD is in sports psychology. So, you know, this is an area that I have experience in, but really it comes down to that lived experience. And the more we can talk, the more we can break down barriers, come alongside one another and, you know, celebrate with one another, cry with one another, and champion one another. And that's our goal at USA Cycling. So I look forward to questions and being able to provide any more information that I can as we move forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelsey. And there was so much that you shared in there. I just want to pick up on a few things. I love that you shared that you were inspired by USA Weightlifting to do that program, because I think that's really the essence of what we're trying to get to with the network, that we can bring sports together to inspire one another to share best practice. But I also love that you talked about other sectors being part of the solution. So the health sector coming in and offering that pro bono counselling support. So what a wonderful example of sharing best practice, bringing other sectors in and collectively finding solutions to a multifaceted problem. And I love how quickly you've adapted to the situation for your athletes who of course have, you know, had some fairly devastating news recently, and really the way that you stayed in contact with them is a really great example. And as you said, it's something that we hope all sports at the pro level can look at. But as you said, sport is across the piece for everyone. So let's hear a little bit from grassroots sport. So please welcome someone who's been at the vanguard of mental health in sports for many years. The 2016 Beyond Sport Global Award winner in the Sport for Health category, David Cohen, CEO of the Doc Wayne Group. David, all yours.
Thank you for having me, and thank you all for being here. Before I share with you about us and what we're doing at Doc Wayne, I really am happy to hear what Trenny and Kelsey were talking about self-care, because if we need to assist others or want to help others, we can't do it unless we're taking care of ourselves. So it's important, especially during this time, to do just that. You know, wake up, wash up, get dressed like you're going to work or going to school, and try to function the best you can. It is difficult, but we can get stir crazy just sitting in our house and at a chair. But Doc Wayne, most of you, well, I don't know if everyone's heard of us, but we're in the mental health space as well as a sport for social change organization. And we've been fusing sport and therapy for over a decade. And what we do is we have sport-based group therapy, therapeutic mentoring, and individual therapy. And we operate like a mental health clinic, but sport is the vehicle that we use to engage with students and kids in community settings and at schools. We're Boston-based, and this has been some trying times. We work with 450 kids a week, and when schools were closed, what do we do? And so we had to think really hard about how we are going to engage the kids, and we had to pivot. And so what have we done? So we're able to offer telehealth to the kids that we work with. The first thing that we did as a group was that we had our clinical team do outreach to every single family that we work with. It wasn't an easy task, but people were happy to hear from Coach. That's what we call our clinical team, they're coaches. And so we offered the ability to try something new and do something virtual. So instead of the fun and games that we do in the gym or in a field, now Coach was going to have some one-on-one time virtually. So we did the outreach, didn't reach everybody, but slowly within the first day, 15 families said, I need help, I need support for my child. And they signed up for an individual session. 15 led to 40. And then as of this morning, I noticed that we're over 110 individual sessions with kids within our network. What we've also done is we've opened that up. So it's not just kids that are under Doc Wayne's programming, but people within our network that know there's a parent or a child that needs some support, needs some counseling, needs to talk to somebody. And so we've started to set up telehealth for those families. Some of our partners, many of them are schools, have had to adjust what they're doing as well. And so we're working in conjunction with them so that we can collaborate and find the best ways to serve all of the families. And so it's not just what we can deliver, but it's things that we can share. And so there's an overload of information that's out there by the hour in terms of where you can find food. Is there an opportunity to find a computer or technology so my child could eventually be connected with school? What's going on in terms of unemployment? So we have a list or a PDF that we keep updating. We have a team member that's designated to that, to keeping news fresh so that we can share that with the families that we are working with on a daily basis. You know, really, I think too, from our team element, we've internally started a thing called Stay Connected. So just like Kelsey was mentioning some of the seminars or things that US Cycling is offering, internally we're trying to share with each other a new recipe, a book, a movie, something to give us some joy while we're going through some significant times and a lot of unknowns. So we're trying to care for each other. We're using Zoom as we are here internally for our own meetings. And so the face-to-face is really a nice thing, even though we're all inside. You know, I know that it's a little bit tricky because people say, well, if I can't offer telehealth, what can I do? And I think the first thing that I would share is that, you know, if you're a coach and you're within an organization and you have a variety of kids that you've been working with for years, doing some outreach is critical. And people want to hear from you, and nothing would be more helpful now than having a coach to lean on, to talk to about whatever it may be. So that's a little bit about what we're doing. Obviously, I'd love to answer questions that you have. You know, I just wish everyone well and stay safe, wash your hands, and we'll get through this together.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for your ongoing leadership in the space of really using sport to engage with young people at a grassroots level and really support their ongoing mental well-being and helping when they're struggling with mental ill health. So thank you. So now is the Q&A time. So I'd like to invite Colleen, Trenny and Kelsey to join David back up here. And we're going to go to the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions for any of our panelists, please do post them on the Q&A tab, and you can go ahead and post those questions right now for me. And then I'm going to start sharing them with our panelists. Let's see what questions are coming through. We're doing this live, so let's find out what those of you in the audience, our very strong numbered audience, want to ask. So we have a question from, now forgive me if I get my pronunciation wrong here, but Blanca de la Quintana. What considerations would you take into account to adapt your message and actions to youth athletes? So maybe a combination of David and Kelsey, perhaps one of you two might like to take that question.
I can go ahead if you want, or David, do you want to start?
No, go ahead, Kelsey, and we'll bring
Go
David
ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our perspective, it's finding the balance between being positive and encouraging, but also being honest. We're certainly tailoring our messages a little bit different to our elite adult athletes versus our younger athletes. You know, I think for the younger ones, it's keeping them entertained, helping them find ways to get involved, to stay active, to think outside of themselves. You know, when we're sharing these stories on In Our Own Words, we're always thinking about making sure that they're appropriate for younger athletes, kind of role model type stories that they can look into. And the biggest thing I think for our youth athletes is just being available to them. You know, this is a time of high stress for everyone. The younger athletes are, you know, naive enough that thankfully it's probably not quite as real to them. But to kind of that in-between group, it's making sure that we're available, we're providing consistency, and we're answering questions as they have them. But then also, you know, trying to stay as lighthearted as we can without being insensitive to the very real realities of what many are facing.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I was just say, I mean, staying positive the best you can is critical. For us, every child that we work with has their own story. And in some cases, they may not have had a home that was a safe place in the first place. And now on top of it, the stress and the anxiety and the challenges that many of them face are incredible, things that most of us couldn't imagine. And so I think being a good listener and trying to just be there for each kid is critical. And we were very sensitive about this and with the COVID-19 piece, and we know that we're going to have to deal with it for months and years to come. So after this, when we get in with the group and we have the kids in front of us, we're going to have to be sensitive to, you know, what's taking place and how do we navigate this moving forward.
Great, thank you, David. And actually, that partly answers the next question that I'm going to read out, that I'll open out to the rest of our panelists, and it comes from Mohammed Al Arabatiyet. It says, we each have our own read of how COVID-19 will impact sports, but from an NGO's perspective, using sports at the grassroots level, it'd be very helpful to hear if the speakers have any insights regarding post-COVID engagement with sports at the grassroots. So David's shared with us the importance of listening and creating a space for those young people coming into our grassroots programs delivered by NGOs, and really doing it by acknowledging what has come to pass through the COVID experience. But are there any other things that perhaps our panelists might wish to share that might help? Any panelists want to come in on that one?
I'll just say it's a challenging question because we just don't know, right? And so I think a lot of we're going to navigate this when things improve. But there's no right or wrong answer. We don't necessarily know how our team is going to work with the kids moving forward. We're just doing the best we can in the moment.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would say right now. I think we're all just going to kind of find our way and find our path.
And I think, if we go back to what Trenny shared with us earlier and on her slides, the items that were placed there, that very practical advice that Trenny shared with us will be equally relevant for our grassroots participants post-COVID as much as they are whilst we sit in the environment right now. I have a question from Robert Smith. Since the US and many other countries around the world are now locked down, are there any suggestions on what to do weekly in terms of maybe coaches could have a weekly group virtual team meeting, or how do we make things sports oriented when we can't be out there and deliver? How do we offer kids support to reach them individually? Any thoughts or any experience that you guys as panelists are currently going through in terms of what you can do? So we've heard from USA Cycling what they're offering their athletes. David shared with us what he's doing with his team and using their coaches as they refer to their therapists. Trenny's given us some examples of what she suggests and how she manages her day on a daily basis. Perhaps I can ask Colleen to come in and give us a wider sense of what might be important in this time now, not just in terms of suicide prevention, but also in terms of thriving and mental wellness. Colleen, perhaps if you have any views.
Yeah, I think just from a broader view, not just sports specific, there's, so many different phases that I think we don't know what all of them will be. But in suicide prevention, I think we're also thinking about what happens when things start to go back to normal, when sports resume, when workplaces go back. How do we make sure we're still staying connected to those who have had their lives even more disrupted than others through this time? And how do we make sure the supports are in place there as well during the recovery phase, and recognizing we don't know what that would look like yet, but that it's important that this is really a marathon, not a sprint, as far as how do we support people right now and in the months and year to come. And so I think that's something for all of us to be keeping in mind, that it's not just when the games resume and when the workplaces resume, that this is a disruption that it has will be something we're dealing with for a long time. And how do we make our interventions and programming adapt to that?
Great.
Rada, do you mind, can I jump in for a sec?
Oh, for sure.
Certainly not an Olympic level or pro level athlete, but to speak to what the coach was asking about keeping in touch and ways to sort of maintain contact with your athletes. Prior to all of this, I was training for the Boston Marathon with a coach, with a group. And we've really used virtual ways of staying in touch. So my coach sends me via an app an app on my phone, workouts for every single day of the week. She checks in on me. We have actually sort of we've taken our group to Instagram using a hashtag. It's just little things that sort of make you again feel like maybe you're working out and still training within a community, even though we're all separate, and we can all sort of check in on each other that way. And it's sort of a little bit more of a, motivation to keep getting out there. Even when maybe you don't want to, there's still that accountability. And I think that's really helped a lot of us not feel so just pulled out of the training cycle and everything that we were in before.
Yeah, if I can add too, my daughter plays club soccer, and this morning we got an email from her coach, and it had a list of the things for this week that he's hoping for the kids to accomplish. And also try to add a video component there. So if anyone had a trick shot or a trick move that they wanted to share with the team, video, put it up so that the team can participate. And so it's been really nice to see those 20 girls stay in touch while they're isolated and not able to get on the pitch.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing all of those insights. And thank you to all 4 of our panelists. So now we're going to open it out to the audience. Those of you that have dialed in or logged in today, at the bottom of your screen, you will see a raised hand function. So if you'd like to perhaps share what you're doing, anything you think that the wider group might benefit from, or just to share your thoughts or your current challenges. Please do feel free to use the raised hand button at the bottom of your screens, and I will invite people to speak as they come up, and I'll unmute you at that point. So please do share if you would like to share any insights right now. Use that raised hand function. Let's see who's brave enough to share some insights. I see some familiar names on here. I'd love to hear from some of you. Okay. Well, if no one's feeling quite ready to share with us, here we go. Someone has popped their hand up. Teresa Roden, please do share.
So to be more clear, this is not Teresa Roden. I'm just pretending to be Teresa Roden. This is Cindy Morris, and I also work with iTry. But this is such a rude question, but can you clarify a little bit about what you wanted us to speak about? I think I was a little bit confused. I'm wondering if anybody else was, and that's why we didn't raise our hands. And then maybe I'll raise my hand better.
No, thank you. This is just an open forum for you guys to share any thoughts or current challenges that you feel might be helpful to put out into the ether, into the group, and make sure that we're able to capture what the current challenges are. So when we share back via the report, people have an opportunity to see what other people are struggling with and where they might be able to support.
So in that case, my answer to that question would be that, so what iTry did was we immediately decided to continue with all of our programming and to translate the entire program into a virtual system, which for those of you who don't know, we do triathlon racing. So turning that into a triathlon experience or into a virtual experience has been quite an adventure. However, I think the biggest thing that we're facing now is how to get word out that we are doing this work still. So our participants know, which is really important, and our regular supporters know, which is very important. But the reality is that finding ways to dynamically reach potential new advocates for this program is harder than we anticipated, and we're spending so much time and resource on simply converting our programs into this virtual space that finding the time and the resource to do kind of everything else is becoming harder as a small organization. So figuring out kind of that balancing act of how to throw everything we've got behind programming versus kind of needing to maintain the systems and even grow the systems of keeping the organization afloat is a really important component for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, thank you for sharing that. And I guess one step in the right direction in terms of that challenge is you sharing that right now, but also thinking about those young people that are part of your program, which I'm personally a huge fan of, and allowing them to be your advocates as well, and asking them to promote it to their wider spaces as well. That's certainly an option as well. I'm going to open it up to see if there is anyone else that would like to share anything before we begin to wrap up. If you would like to share anything, please do pop your hand up. Great. Girl, if you'd like to share. I have unmuted you. Can we unmute Girl, please? There we go. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Girle and I work for Achilles International. It's an organization we serve disabled athletes. So we have chapters in 24 countries all over the world. Our biggest challenge is because we have disabled athletes and they cannot go out by themselves for their training runs, do anything without a help, without a guide. So, and you know, during this time, we're trying to have social isolation. The only thing we can do for our athletes is to have virtual training at home. But that is not the most important part for us. It's a mental health, as we talked about it. So I just wanted to share a beautiful story. Yesterday, I was able to connect a visual impaired runner in Belgium with another visual impaired runner in UK. So they befriended each other. So it was the happiest moment in their lives, in my life as well. Such a small story, but connecting people, each, you know, runners, they support each other. I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So grateful for you sharing that, and what a beautiful way to bring this segment to a small close. Thank you. And thanks to all of you for your contributions today. Thanks to those of you that logged on to listen, ask questions, and to share your experiences. I really do hope that you found today's experience really interesting and inspirational. And as I said at the beginning of the webinar, we're all about action here at Beyond Sport. So if you'd like to be part of a network that takes action, please do consider joining the Stay in the Game network. You'll get access to digital learning, plenty of resources, platforms to share best practice and progress, and the chance to come together to approach key issues in this space, and crucially, to tackle them together. You'll all get information about the full member benefits in an email alongside a report on today's conversations, a link to the recording of the webinar, and links to organisations that can offer support if you or those around you need it. So do join the newest member of the network, the Barcelona FC Foundation, and join us. And today wouldn't have been possible without our wonderful speakers. So Colleen, Trenny, Kelsey, and David, thank you. And nor would it have happened without our founding partners, the National Action Alliance for Suicide Prevention, the Citroën 33 Foundation, Centerstone, and USA Cycling. Thank you again. And of course, to our founding supporters who are such a crucial part of the Beyond Sport family: MLB, MLS, NBA, NFL, NHL, and WNBA. And finally, as we continue to find ourselves more than ever needing to be present and live in the moment, I'm just going to build a little on what Trenny shared earlier and the moment that she and I shared last week when we talked about how crucial it is to really be mindful at times like this. So I'm going to share with you one of the tools that I learned in treatment last year that really helps me to be in the moment. And it's called 4-7-8 breathing. You breathe in through your nose for 4, you hold the breath in the back of your throat for 7, and you blow it out through your mouth for 8, and you repeat it 4 times. So I urge you to Google 4-7-8 breathing, practice how you do it. And in those moments where you're struggling to really focus on what you can control in the here and now, where you can keep your head exactly where your feet are and find something small to be grateful for today, I urge you to use that 4-7-8 just to keep us all together and safe in that moment. So my name's been Radha, and this has been the inaugural Stay in the Game Network webinar. Thank you all for being part of it. Stay well, stay safe, and stay inside. Thanks very much.